god, I'm so sweaty. Hello people on the internet, it is I, Sketchbook Sarah, or as you can call me Sarah, and today I want to talk to you about the art of curiosity. So I've been seeing a lot of chat about the idea of like the rise of anti-intellectualism and like how we as a society value more like work and hustle than we do like thought, and how society has not always been this way. Like, I just spent a lot of time in Italy, in Florence, which is the birth of the Renaissance, as you may know, and Florence actually is built on thought, and it is built on scientific thought and artistic thought and political thought. And Italy as a whole and as a culture really seems to value more human skill than it does really like work, whereas American culture is very much like capitalism, work, hustle, grind set, mindset. But I feel like we've all had this discussion how everyone is sort of sick of that, and we're all kind of trying to move on or do other things, or at least people in my section of the internet are, and we're all thinking about different ways to move forward and how to actually be happy in our lives. Because if you've worked, if you've hustled, you'll know it's not a pleasant experience. Like, hustle culture really does sort of rob the soul of what it means to live. I'm a very hardworking person. Like, I definitely hustle, especially for my artwork is really where I put a lot of my efforts into, like, you know, that sort of mindset. But that isn't my artist brain. This video should really be about getting in touch with your inner artist and not worrying about selling it, not worrying about making anything worthwhile, and just tending the garden that's in your heart, as cheesy as that is. And like I said, we've been riding this anti-intellectual wave. You know, colleges right now are being defunded and persecuted by our government, and we have, you know, we've celebrated this need to give up our brain power to ChatGPT, and how it's so nice we don't have to think anymore. And, you know, people are just sort of not valuing the value of human thought. And I'm not one of these people. I've always been a very curious person, and curiosity and intellectualism is something that inspires me and influences my work. So first thing I want to talk to you about is my Commonplace notebook, and it's pretty, but yours doesn't have to be pretty. Mine is just pretty because I went into a shop, and this Celtic inspired pink unicorn notebook with handmade paper was $40, and I had just made a lot of tips that day, and I have no self-control. So yours by no means has to be pretty. In fact, I recommend most people who really aren't into journaling to not go out and waste a bunch of money on a notebook, because most people who try to get into it, you will not succeed the first time. Like, I have been journaling on and off since I was probably 8 years old, and I still don't finish journals. I still leave them to rot on my shelf for 6 months before ever using them. Just because people on the internet have a nice fancy journal doesn't mean you need to. And in my Commonplace journal, I sketched. I've actually recently changed the way I use my sketchbook. So I used to use my sketchbook as my Commonplace notebook, but now I've separated it into my nice sketchbook and my Commonplace sketchbook. So for my nice sketchbook, that's where I use, that's like an art book where I really just paint in there, and I want it to look nice and pretty, and you know, that's where I make my small paintings. But in here, I make garbage. Like, this was a figure sketch that I tried to cover up with paint, and then I gave up because it didn't work. And like, I plan a lot of things in here, and when I plan, I really don't give a shit when I'm making it look nice or not. Like, this is probably the nicest I will ever plan. But what I do in here is I take notes on things, and I write. And writing things and keeping things in a place, and making sure you have your thoughts down is really important to this step. And what do I write about? So for me, a lot of people use their Commonplace notebooks to reflect on different media that they consume, and I do the same thing. Recently, I've been a lot into reading, and I read a lot, and I like to write down my thoughts about these different books that I'm reading. And I don't read just fiction, I read a fair amount of nonfiction as well. And if you find that you would like to be this person who reads, you'd like to be this person who like knows things, I think that you just need to remove yourself from like the academic barrier and exclusion that you think it has. Because for me, I personally have always grown up as someone who never identified as studious, and it's really funny, a lot of my favorite teachers who I find the most inspiring and intellectually interesting to me growing up said a lot of the same things. I remember my high school teacher said that he didn't even really get his high school diploma. I think he found a loophole where he got a GED and then went to college with his GED by there was a loophole in getting into a college, and then through that college he went and got a PhD, and now he's a high school teacher. But he's like, yeah guys, I technically don't have a high school education, I have something else that allowed me to go through college, but I really never got my high school diploma. And he turned out to be one of my favorite teachers that I ever had. And I think that academia and like high school are kind of weird, where I personally never felt like I fit into traditional high school, middle school, elementary school style education, where it's really about memorizing facts and not following your own intellectual curiosity unless you're good at it, unless it's math or science. If you are not a math or science person, if you're a humanities person, you tend to not do super well in the high school and like the standard education system.
I will very quickly add that I do struggle with being told what to do, like with assignments. So I like to research stuff and read things for pleasure, but when I'm being told to do it for an assignment, I am definitely less inclined to do so. And I think that's a big thing a lot of people struggle with as well, is that it's hard to be interested in something that you are forced to do that is homework, that is a chore.
And so once I went to college, and I went to art school, but I do go to a academic rigorous institution, and I hang out with like Brown students because that's where my college is that it's located on Brown's campus. It's like our sister school, so I happen to hang out with some people who go to Ivy League schools, and I talk to them. And I think that those two experiences back to back made me realize that A, I'm a lot smarter than I give myself credit for, and B, smart people aren't as smart as you think. So to me, I've realized that genius is really kind of a nonsensical term, because when you meet these people, and this is no shade or tea anyway, if you're watching this you go to Brown, but meeting people who do go to these Ivy League level institutions, and they do write these knockout academic papers, and they have these SAT scores, and on paper they're intellectually genius and superior. When you meet these people and you talk to them in real life, you realize that they are normal people, and they struggle in a lot of other areas. They just happen to be really good at this one specific area. And for me, I didn't realize that I too am smart and worthy of this level of praise, but I just wouldn't allow myself to have it because I show it in ways that aren't as hard skills as other people's are, like math or science or things like that. So because I make art, and because I think about subjects that aren't astrophysics, I think about like feminism and sociology and history and things like that in art, that it doesn't negate the fact that that's still a valuable intellectual pursuit. So I think that just breaking down the barriers and sort of like the snobbery of intellectualism is sort of the first place to start. Because for me, my interest in like research and rabbit holes, I saw this great video about rabbit holes and how they're great for your curiosity. So that started for me with watching dumbass pop culture commentary videos on YouTube, and that led to me being more interested in discourse and conversations and sociology and how different factors play into each other.
If you want a great example of dumbass social media discourse that is interesting politically, I think that the Bi Sister scandal was fascinating when it happened, especially for LGBT politics. It's kind of different now because if you're unfamiliar, the scandal is about when James Charles was the most famous gay man makeup YouTuber, was canceled by a woman and a couple other gay men orchestrating his downfall because they were jealous of him. And the way they did it was they accused him of being creepy,
sucking dick and cock. I'm just oh my god, time and place, and you did it at my birthday dinner.
Now, I actually went back and checked Tati's original deleted video, and she actually never uses the phrase sexual predator. It's funny, I remember her calling him that because that became the story on Twitter. But what she actually said was James had tried to trick straight men into thinking they're gay.
Oh my god, you tried to trick a straight man into thinking he's gay yet again.
Which is pretty different from calling him a sexual predator. But see, this is what cancel culture does. It takes one story and transforms it into a significantly different story. The headline I would write about the James and Tati story might read, Tati Westbrook accuses James Charles of trying to trick straight men into thinking they're gay. But cancel culture transforms that story into the headline, James Charles is a sexual predator. Interesting.
And then he was proven, I think, innocent ultimately, although at the beginning got mega canceled. It was crazy. But then he turned around and then I think became a predator, and now I hear he's defending predators. So that in itself is really weird. But as I'm saying, like, my mom watches a lot of reality TV. Like, my mom learns a lot about other cultures from fucking 90 Day Fiance. You can get your information from a lot of unconventional places, and I don't think you need to have, like, shame. You don't need to be guilty about your pleasures.
Things like dumb, quote-unquote, dumb pop culture things can be analyzed through different academic schools of thought. And the more I progressed in academia, the more I found that it doesn't have to be as hard as you might think it would be. And because you're not turning this into anyone. Like I said, the art of curiosity, the thing I'm talking about here, is really for my own pleasure. Because intellectual pursuit should not have this end goal of, like, making you, like, it's not a prize to hold in your hand. It is just something that you do to make yourself feel more connected to yourself and just to expand your life and enrich your life. And so I think that viewing it from this perspective of, I need to get smarter so I can hold my big brain in my hands and say, look guys, I'm smart. That's not the goal of this. So for me, when I first started researching, I started what was easiest for me to access as someone who doesn't really like to read books. And I am taking classes, but, like, not everyone can just go and sign up for a random college class that they are interested in and just take it. There's a lot of different things. So I like to self-educate for a lot of the topics that I'm interested in that I can't get access to, and I like to do that through YouTube. So for me, I found that YouTube is an amazing resource. I like to put on videos while I do work, while I clean, while I drive. I listen to audiobooks while I walk around. So I think doing things like that can really make it so it's not this big undertaking. Like, you don't have to go to a library and, like, pour through books. Sorry about the construction if you can hear that. Pour through books to understand concepts. You can look up a free audiobook online. You can look up a podcast. You can look up a YouTube video. You can watch a documentary. There are so many different avenues that you can read articles. If reading is more your thing, you can do that. But I also find it really helpful and engaging to discuss these things in real life. So I think that for me, the most beneficial things that I like and knowledge I have is through other people and discussion. And this can be online discussion. I'm sort of doing that right now. I'm responding to a lot of the things I've seen online and said online. Honestly, the internet can be kind of a stupid place to have discourse, though. So I really recommend going and talking about these things with people in your real life. So for me personally, I really like talking about things like this with my friends or my family members. And I also really like to talk about certain topics with people that I disagree with. Now, I don't like to talk to people who are brick walls. And I know a lot. So I don't really like to have, like, a nuanced feminist conversation with my 1950s grandma. I instead like to have it with, like, my stepdad, he's a man and he's got some internalized stuff from being a man in his 50s, but ultimately he is willing to at least hear me out. So I think that it's also, like, pick your battles. You don't want to, like, wear yourself out having, like, arguments with people over stuff that, like, doesn't even matter. And if you're not interested in, like, if you're interested in much more niche topics, then maybe find a friend who you can explore that thing together with and you can learn together, rather than, like, maybe if you're really interested in, like, bugs, then, like, not everyone will have the knowledge to have a conversation about bugs with you, but maybe find someone who's also a bit interested in, like, try to research together and sort of use that to strengthen your relationship. I remember I had a friend where we had, like, a book club and we would read books together and we would call and discuss and talk about our thoughts on the book. I think that's a great thing to do. Things like that. It doesn't have to be a book. It can be a movie club. You can watch a movie with a friend and just try to have, like, more nuanced conversations with the people around you and just find people that you can engage with this. Now, the internet is a great start, but like I mentioned, for me, the best education I get is actually offline. So like I said, talking to people, but also going places. So for me, exploring things, learning things, and going to physical locations and being in the spot to learn, and with that intention to learn, is how I feel like I make the most meaningful progress in my education. So whether that be travel, obviously that's the most inaccessible and expensive method, but it's, I think, the most effective. So if you're interested about a place, you could go there. It doesn't have to be so consequential, though. For me, I like, when I'm curious about a subject, I like to try to see if I can go to a museum or visit a location or go on a hike. I remember being in Pompeii and they had an entire exhibition on how women were treated during Pompeii, and I'm very interested in that. And I spent most of my time at Pompeii in there reading every single plaque. And I could have absorbed this information on the internet, yes, but for me it was much more cementing in my mind to actually be physically present in Pompeii while I'm reading about how women were treated in, like, the brothels, and, like, how slavery was for women, and then going to the physical location of these different things where women were, to me, just made a lot more impactful indent on my time and my experience and my views. Being curious about the area where you live is a very easy place to start. So that doesn't require any travel, obviously. So for me, I happen to be from a beautiful location. I'm from Colorado, and I'm very interested in Colorado history. I'm interested in natural history, and Colorado's a great place for that because, I'm interested in bugs, I'm interested in geology, I'm interested in evolution. I am interested in cowboys in the West, in Native Americans and how our government has effed them over time and time again. I'm interested in how all these factors play into current politics, and local politics is a big thing. And with local politics, you can actually, these people, affect you. You know what I mean? If you're studying something from a far-off place in a far-off land, it doesn't affect you. But if you want to have something that you can hold, then you can research what's right around you. But if you'd rather use it as a place to escape, you can do that too. So if you're interested in a far off place that you'd like to escape to, per se, is if you don't like where you are, researching things like different time periods or historical movements can be an interesting way to explore your intellectualism. Now, what do you do with all this research? What do you do with these rabbit holes that you have been falling down? So for me, I'm an artist, I paint, so I like to turn these different things into different art projects. I think a lot of people have lost the art of a personal project where they think that every hobby needs to be this monetizable side hustle, and I think a lot of people are less inclined to just work on stuff that interests them for themselves to enrich their lives. And for me, a lot of the things that I do work on for myself are part of how I make my money, just because I'm sort of one trick pony where I don't really ever think I'm gonna get a traditional accounting or secretary type day job where I work retail or an office or something like that. I'll probably always work in the arts. So for me, it's different where I find other people have this difficult time separating their work from their play. I'm sort of not that person. I play where I work at the same time, and it can be kind of emotionally exhausting to not really exit the need to be an artist both in my professional and my personal life. But I don't know, I think I struggle with this less than most people do, but I know a lot of people do, where it has to be one or the other. And for me, I think that pursuing things that I'm interested in regardless, and make paintings that I know won't sell or won't do well on Instagram, I still do that because it's a part of me, and I need to express myself and I need to make the art that is not for public consumption to make the art that is for public consumption. And even so, your passion projects could turn into something that you want to promote and you want to monetize. But I don't think that starting that with the pursuit of monetization and the pursuit of success is necessarily the way to go about when you're formulating and you're driving your curiosity. Because at this stage, you just want to be curious about the world. You just want to look through the world again, like how kids do. Kids are just fascinated by everything. I remember being a kid and I would go out to my backyard and I knew jack about scientific research or anything, but I learned about how scientists would collect information and research, and I learned about how they would go out in the woods with their journals and just observe nature, and I thought that was the coolest thing ever. And I didn't know anything about how the world worked, and so I wanted to discover things about the world too. And I think most kids are like this. Most kids are interested in the stars. They want to be astronauts, they want to be movie stars, they want to be YouTubers, hell, whatever. I do like to put some meat on my plate when I'm researching. So when I'm researching, I do like to pick at least one or two academic sources to look at, and it don't have to be difficult. Some of my favorite theory is Bell Hooks, because I find her work incredibly easy to understand and read. And, you don't have to read these, oh my god, squirrel, scared me. You don't have to read these super dense academic texts in order to do research. I think that even just reading articles or, books, nonfiction books is a great place to start. The squirrel is really interested in me. Hello? I also feel like when I'm trying to come up with concepts for something, what I'm researching, and I feel like I'm sort of on the edge of something, I find it easiest to remember that not everything has to be so lofty. When I'm trying to synthesize my research into something new to say about the topic, I kind of get insecure that I feel like I'm not bringing anything to the table. And for me, I've realized over time that the best way to go about dissecting and sort of adding to the conversation is just by showing up as yourself and showing up as with your own perspective, because everyone is leading these different lives, and everyone's different life will have a new sort of angle to look at a subject from. So I think when researching things, I don't think that you should get bogged down by the fact that you feel too young, or in my case, like I feel like as a young woman, and like especially when I was like a teenage girl, I didn't feel like any of my interests or my thoughts or ideas would be taken seriously and were like sort of worth being valued at the same level as like these men. I remember when I first learned that Michelangelo carved his favorite piece by me. So that's a squirrel that was looking at me earlier. He's very friendly. He keeps coming up to me. I remember when I was in high school and I learned that Michelangelo carved his favorite statue, my favorite of his, Pieta, at age 20. I realized something, which is that you don't have to be like an old man in order to make like groundbreaking work. And for most of history, we forget that like people lived about mid-ages 60. Like you were lucky to live to the age of 60, but like by your 30s you were like middle-aged, and like by your 20s you were like a real person. Whereas now, since our lifespan is so much longer, that like, you know, 20-year-olds are treated like babies, which is true. I feel like a baby. But at the same time, I have to remember that like all these great art movements and advancements and poetry and intellectualism and thought movements and philosophy was all done by like 20-year-olds with nothing more to do than like hang around, drink wine, and chit chat and hang out. Like when you look at great art movements of the past, you realize that they're all just a bunch of friends who like art, and they hang out together, and then they bounce ideas off of each other. But they're all interested, and they're all curious, and they're all trying to interrogate the same thing and try to come up with something new together. And I think that people forget that this is how art movements are made, and it's not stupid, and you're not crazy, and you're not pursuing something that isn't worthwhile just because you're not successful yet, or may never will be. You know, you always have to think that Van Gogh died penniless and nameless. No one knew who he was, and now he's like the most famous painter in the world. So don't undersell yourself just because you haven't made it yet. I feel like you're not allowed to fake it till you make it, and faking it till you make it is cringe. Like there's this fear of being cringe always present in our society, and I think that goes along with hustle culture. Like it's not cringe to conform to society's expectations of you and make money and put your head down and live your life that way, but it is soul crushing. And for me, I'm naturally by disposition a cringe person, I guess. Like I've always liked cringy things. I dye my hair pink, you know, I talk about feminism. Like that's the cringiest thing in the world, and painting is cringe and everything is cringe, but everything worthwhile in life is cringe. So unfortunately, if you want to be happy and free and not really give a fuck, then you have to be cringe sometimes, and that's just sort of the reality of it. For example, I'm filming in public right now, and there's people around me, and I feel extremely cringe. I think that everyone should get into my hobby, which is rabbit holes, and just start researching more and start finding out what drives the world, what makes you curious, what makes things tick. And I think that by finding things tick, you'll find new things that interest you. If you've been feeling kind of like bored or like not in tune with the world or disassociated or present or things like that, I find that when I get in these kind of moods and funks, that I'm happiest when I'm in this flow state of finding things, and it feels good to uncover secrets. It feels like detective work almost. And this sort of curiosity is what leads to innovation and what leads to creativity. And I'm a very creative person. I think most people are. And turning your creativity into something that you find enjoyable is a really great skill. And I think it's a great way to, you know, not only ward off boredom, but like sort of keep yourself here and keep yourself caring and loving and open to new ideas and open to exploring and just sort of all the things that you need to be good and feel good about your life and society, and feel that society can change too. I think that in this moment there's like a lot of hopelessness, and it's scary because like, at least from my perspective, it feels like we're moving backwards, where for my whole lifetime we're moving forwards, and now we're moving backwards. But I'm scared about this, so I research about it, and you know, there's always been periods of life where things move backwards, but you can learn that it doesn't always have to be this way, and that humans aren't a fixed thing. And through researching different things and how different people made art during these time periods has been really comforting to me, and how societies can recover from these kinds of things has been really hopeful. And I think that was what we need a lot right now, is hope. And I think that this agency that you can have to lead your life how you want and learn the things you want to know with the internet, which is, it's a positive to this hell invention that this Pandora's box we've opened, is a great place to start.
So I'm crashing at my dope uncle's house with a pool. Aren't I so lucky? And I have been itching to paint something, so I'm going to make this little heart-shaped canvas. I'm going to fill it with some flowers, and it's going to be a gay old time, and I'm going to sit outside and paint it by the pool here, living in the height of luxury. So let's get started. It's been fun painting outside, next to the pool. I feel so luxurious, and it's a beautiful summer day out. Something about the summer air just makes life feel different. I am literally never happier than when it's summer. I have kind of terrible seasonal depression. It's manageable. I'm not going too crazy, but man, I get really sad during the winter. I just can't help it every single year. This is my progress on my painting. I'm doing it on this heart-shaped canvas, and it's so much fun. And I started out with a pink background, and I'm just layering sort of a gemstone and a rainbow trippy pattern on top, sort of inspired by the vase, because I was really torn on whether or not to include the vase or only paint the flowers. And I decided to only do the flowers, that way I could experiment more with my style and not really have to worry about realism as much. But I'm having fun so far. I just sort of started doing detail work and started making the blobs actually look like flowers. I would like a career on social media, if possible. That would be really nice, because that would enable me to have more control over my art and follow my own pursuits and stuff. However, social media is becoming a worse and worse place to try to make money off of. However, it's becoming more and more the only option. So it's you're stuck between a rock and a hard place, and it's just fuck, I guess I have to conform to this crap, but I hate it. I really do. That's why I've been so into reading recently. It's just I don't know, I listen to a lot of YouTube videos. That's sort of my main form of background noise. I really don't watch TV shows or movies in my free time. I pretty much exclusively watch YouTube videos or listen to audiobooks or podcasts. And sometimes YouTube videos can get kind of stupid or toxic, whereas I find the books I read don't affect my mental health. I just feel a bit healthier sometimes when I'm reading books, because they're either fictional or they're I'm learning something, and I just kind of trust the sources of books better. But anyway, also reading is really fun. I am finally a book nerd, and it's really fun because when I was a child, I hated reading with a passion. I remember I would get assigned those reading challenges, and I would despise them and be no. So that's why I would read dork diaries, but those would never count. Those I read incessantly, and that's what sort of inspired me to do all the self-documentation that I do. So they really helped me sketch every day, because dork diaries, if you don't know, is Diary of a Wimpy Kid, but the drawings are a lot more complex. Low-key, the art style is kind of fire, but I would try to draw my diaries in the same format as her. So I was doing daily drawings of me in my everyday life. So I have illustrated journals in the style of frickin' dork diaries. I wrote squee and everything. It was as cringe as it sounds. From 5th grade, no, more 3rd grade through 6th grade, and then in 7th grade I stopped doing that, and I started doing a sketchbook around 6th or 7th grade. I did that more consistently, and I just didn't draw in my diary, or I did it much less. So, and then I've moved into where I am now, where I've kind of stopped putting this pressure on myself to do journaling a certain way, do sketchbooking a certain way, and I'm just kind of doing what feels right, because I know I'm always creating. For example, if I put in all the effort I do into journaling as I do into YouTube videos, that cuts into my YouTube video time, and what I do in my journal is essentially what I do on my YouTube videos, which is rant and just sort of talk. I kind of like that my YouTube video is more like a podcast, because that's just the kind of content that I personally enjoy. Because of that, I don't put any pressure on myself to be doing this, or if I'm just more into making finished paintings, that takes up a lot of time that I would usually dedicate to making sketchbook work, and that's completely fine. I'm doing the same amount of work, I'm just you know, not putting pressure on myself to like make any sort of which thing. You know, social media can like really pressure, I feel like, new people to be really, or even veterans. Like, I feel like in art school there's a bit of this too, just because you're like constantly showing your work to other people. But I feel like there is this pressure to like always make stuff that's good, and I definitely feel that. Like when I make a bad drawing, I'm upset about it, but like the thing is, it's just, you just got to get up and make the next one, you know? I feel like that's the key. It's just failing a lot. Who knows, maybe this will turn into a failure. I have been like low-key flopping recently. Like I'm working on a commission, and you know, there's not a hard deadline, so it's like fine that I'm letting it rest, but I would just, every time I have like a paid piece, I like getting it off my desk as soon as possible, because like that way, like when I'm working on personal projects, it doesn't feel like it's like nagging at me, because like if I have things that they're due, I'm like, fuck, I'm like, I need to prioritize my time. Like, what am I doing? Like, I feel guilty working on personal art, but I'm also like unmotivated, you know? So I just try to get it over with. And also it's like fun. Thankfully I've gotten into the space where I'm like, I only take stuff that I'm like would have fun working on. If I would like hate working on it, I don't take crap like that anymore. I used to take literally whatever came on my desk that I could get, I would take, which is good. You know, you can try out what you like and what you don't, because honestly I didn't know what I liked, and back then I was like, whatever, I want experience, I just want to try out a bunch of different stuff. But now I can safely say that like it's not worth my time, I don't think. This commission of this dog I'm working on is just not coming out the way I want it to, and then I was working on this digital painting, and I've just been like kind of distracted this week. I just haven't had any time to like really get down and get into flow state. I've just kind of been working out of the sad fact that I just haven't had much time, but I'm kind of too exhausted to do any good work, but I work anyway. I've just been doing a lot of ceramics class, which is like physically more taxing than I thought it would be. Like my back low-key like really hurts from doing it. It's so much fun though, and I stay there for so long, and I love the class, but it's like, it's a lot, and I have to drive so far to get to it, because like they didn't have any classes I wanted to take at colleges near me. That's why I'm at my uncle's house, is that he lives closer to where I'm taking classes, because I'm like, I really don't want to keep driving up every single day. Like, this is such a waste of gas and my money and a drain on the planet. But I need my credits, and low-key I think it would be a bigger waste of time for me to take a class that I didn't like. So I'm like, you know what, I'll just take the class that I would for sure enjoy and not waste my time, because I have taken classes that I personally felt like waste of time, and they piss me off more than they enrich me, and I'd rather make art that I'm proud of in a class that I like. So that's what I'm doing, and I love this class so far. It's really fun. However, I'm at it a lot, and I'm driving a lot for it, and driving just makes me tired, and I feel like whenever I'm home, I'm always like, there's always something to do. I'm like behind on something. So one thing that I want to talk about is the importance of reading, because I have just been so into reading as a hobby, and I've been really into book talk. And the way I got into reading was honestly listening to other people review and talk about books. Like, I really like rant videos where like I love with Cindy. She is hilarious, and she talks about really interesting books, and I really like her perspective, and I like her very dry humor. She's very funny, and I honestly love listening to her talk about any books, and I love her listening to her rants. And then I've also, on TikTok, I've always loved Lucky Lefty, who's a TikToker who often reviews really interesting books, and I like their takes on anything, so I like their reviews on books. And then I just have a couple other people and channels that have been suggested to me, and I just really liked book talk, even though I didn't do much reading. I still was like dipping my toe into reading. I used to go to Barnes and Nobles and like buy like physical books, but now I am addicted to reading. I love to read all the time. It's all I do is I read, and I think that reading has only grown more important in our political landscape. Like, reading is political, and it's a form of entertainment that I think is especially necessary as the internet grows more fascist, and as like our forms of media grow more fascist. Books are like inherently able, like, in a bubble, and therefore they're like safe from the day-to-day influence of without being censored. When they're censored, that's when we have trouble, but when they're not censored, they're free from like the day-to-day influxes of political discourse, because, you know, they're written, they're published. You know, you can write revision chapters, you can have discussion about a book, but what's in the text is ultimately what's there for the most part. And, you know, that's inherently different from like news cycles that change all the time. And, you know, obviously there's a ton of bad books out there, but like as far as information sources go, it's like, you know, it's more reliable than a lot of other places. But also, like, reading doesn't even have to be that. I think that as long as you're reading, it can be like fairy smut books. I know those are really popular right now. I think that there's a lot of really cool stuff going on online where people are becoming a lot more open about their sort of like cringy internet past, especially as like girls. I feel like being a fangirl online used to be like the worst, cringiest thing you could ever be. Maybe not the worst, but it's definitely like on the cringe list. And you don't get me wrong, there's a lot of good reasons. You know, I saw the way some fandoms behaved and I went, oh my god, guys, let's chill out a bit. But for the most part, like, it was so over-hating. Like, everyone was obsessed with just hating on teenage girls' interests, and I harp about this all the time because I really experience it, and that's why a lot of girls develop this not like other girls thing. It always goes back to sexism. I've been reading a lot of feminist books, actually. I really love and recommend Bell Hooks to everyone. I remember I took a feminist literature class in high school because I went to, I call it gay high school, but I went to art high school. And one of the classes that you could take, because they didn't have like a sort of like a literature 3, they had like sophomore year English and freshman year English, but they didn't really have a junior year English. They had, I think, like queer and feminist literature, African American literature, and maybe like Native American literature, and then like the AP classes. And I love the teacher who taught feminist and queer literature, and so obviously naturally I wanted to take that class, and I actually really liked that class. I took it during COVID, and it was like, low-key, I didn't always do the readings, but like when I did, I found that like that class still impacts my education on feminism today, which I feel like is my main topic that I speak from with my art. I kind of, you know, with that, it's just sort of like write what you know. And, you know, what I know is, I know some sexism, so that's what I will talk about. But, you know, what you don't know, I think you should research. And what I don't know is being a black woman. And one thing I really like about Bell Hooks is that her writing is super accessible. Like, when I first read it for that class back in high school, I read Feminist Theory, Margin to Center, and that was one of the few books I actually did read. Actually, no, I take that back. I think I did most of the reading for that class. I got better about doing that. I was pretty bad about that in, like, middle school. But ever since 8th grade, I did start reading most of the books. And I was bad about that sophomore year, even though I shouldn't have been. I read Huckleberry Finn. I did not read The Awakening, even though I'm literally going to read it now because I think I should have read it. But it was COVID, so whatever. Because then you're going to do it later because you regret not doing it when you were a dumb high schooler. I really enjoy her work. And I read All About Love because I saw everyone else reading it. And I did enjoy that. And now I'm reading the free audiobook I found on YouTube because I have used all my Audible credits and all my Spotify premium credits. But I'm reading Masculinity in Men. I think this would be a great entry book to feminist theory, even for women, just because I feel like it breaks down a lot of stereotypes about bad feminism that I really enjoy. Like, I think that Bell Hooks just tends to have a pretty level-headed worldview, at least in the books that I read of hers. And I think that, I don't know, I'm just an intersectional feminist, so and she is too, if I am classifying her correctly. It's good stuff because there is some feminist trash out there, like all things. You know, you can read garbage, but like low-key, even reading garbage can expand your worldview. Like, you know, even like the books that are dumb and like, you know, like the fairy smut books, like you can still learn different things about people or yourself or like your relationships or things like that, or just, you know, characters or writing in general. You know, it can have some beautiful prose. I know Chuck Tingle is a really interesting author. I actually haven't read any of his books, but I kind of want to. He makes like these really strange erotica books, and they're like often like apparently they're really well written. I really like the YouTuber Strange Eons. I don't know how to pronounce it, but she does these really amazing book reviews. Some of my favorite book review videos of her are like, oh my god, Onision's book. If you were a 12-year-old girl on the internet, did you also watch Onision? Because that man haunts my psyche and kind of reminds me of my father a tiny bit. He, like, you know, even reading that garbage book, you can still learn something about how the human mind can operate when you've lost all your marbles, you know what I mean? Like, even dumb things like that, to me, are, like, still, if it gets you reading, I feel like that's good, because I feel like you never stick with that. I feel like once you're into reading, you tend to want to try other things. At least that's how I am, you know? I started low-key with, like, fan-fiction-y type, like, gay romance novels that me and my friend group of lesbians would all read together. And you know what? A lot of those books were really good. I remember one of my favorite books I read from that little book club we had was Aristotle and Dante Discovered the Secrets of the Universe. And we learned about that book because they had a passage from it on the SAT, and we looked it up and we thought it was interesting. And we read it together, and it's actually a really good book. And it's still one of my favorite books I've ever read. So what I'm saying is that intellectual stuff is often, to me, like, behind this wall of insecurity about being cringe and expertise anxiety, because I feel like, you know, if you're a reader, like, in order to count, you have to read these, like, super serious books, and you have to, like, you know, really take it seriously, and you have to read theory and whatever. And, like, I enjoy reading theory, you know, I read that because that's what I enjoy. I don't think there's any harm if you only read fairy smut books and that's where you stay. Low-key, that's fine. Like, who cares? I think that's a lot better, because you're, like, not on your phone, you're not engaging with technology, you're, like, present in the world, you're with a physical thing. And, you know, I think it's very telling that all the fascists try to ban the fucking books. You know, they all put them in the pile. That's a very big deal. Actually, let me ask my dad about his experience with banning books, because my dad's hobby is fighting with Republicans on Facebook. And this has led to him attending, like, a ton of protests for my local school library for book banning. And he's like, my dad that's his hobby. My hobby is reading. My dad's hobby is fighting with Republicans online.
What are your thoughts on, like, what you've experienced with, like, the protests you've attended in regarding to book banning?
I think that it's an invented controversy, and it's an invention that happens over time. It first happened in the 80s with the Satanic Panic, and it's all a way for politicians of a certain political party to rally people that are very conservative and much older. And, you know, at that time it was rock music and Dungeons and Dragons, and these days it's transsexuals and LGBT.
Yeah.
So it's always, you know, they pick a minority that they think can't fight back, and they rally their troops against them, and they do so for political points and us versus them. During, I believe, the summer of 2021, 2022, there was a series of challenges in Douglas County libraries regarding books and book bans, and several of us took note that the book bans were very specific to LGBT authors and people of color. And the organization Moms for Liberty is famous nationally for doing those book bans. Well, during one of the meetings at Douglas County Libraries in Council Rock, there was a person who at the time stood up to give a protest regarding a book, and it turns out she's currently a member of Moms for Liberty, so it's not surprising me this person. She was at the meeting in the Castle Rock Library, and she stood up to the board and gave her speech regarding a book that she wanted banned. And so she started describing the sex acts that were contained in the book. And she said, you know, that the book contained descriptions of masturbation and of gay sex. And she said, oh, and it's got butt plugs in it, and I don't even know what that is. So there were several members of the audience, myself included, that laughed out loud, and we thought that was very amusing, which earned her the nickname Butt Plug Amy. So this person became an officer of Moms for Liberty, and actually got nominated to the board of Douglas County Libraries recently.
Were these the people who called the FBI on you?
Yes, that was the group. Their first public activity was to attempt to stop the drag show that was occurring at Southridge in that same calendar year. And so they spun up a group of protesters, and then myself and others spun up a group of counter-protesters. And so I implied during a Facebook post that I was going to, I think I put hashtag Antifa in one of my responses. They took that and they took it to Republican lawmakers, and several Republican lawmakers in the local county government and state government signed a paper that said, we think Antifa is going to come here because of that. We should cancel this event. So, unknowingly or unexpectedly, I almost caused the cancellation of the event while I was trying to be helpful.
Nice, thank you.
I read The Artist's Way, and though I personally didn't find it helpful because I literally already automatically do everything it prescribed, so I didn't find all the steps all that helpful to me because I am very solid in my artistic practice. However, if you just sort of need like a fresh start or just a new way of looking at things, or just someone to sort of guide you through the artistic process and you don't mind a little woo-woo-ness, I think it's a great book. Dochi, I think, did it and recorded it on YouTube. So if you want to check that out, you can see how other people do it. I know a lot of people document their process of doing it, and I think that it's a really great concept. I literally said the reason I didn't connect with it is because I did everything it prescribed already. So obviously I approve of it. I think it just translates really well the artistic experience for people who are just getting into it. I do think it's interesting when people like describe their artistic practice in a spiritual way, because I'm so not that. I think it's kind of cool, actually. I kind of liked hearing that descriptions as an atheist. So though I'm very critical of religion and spirituality, and I'm not spiritual myself, I do find it incredibly fascinating to listen to and read about, which is why I read Eat, Pray, Love. And spirituality and religion is one of my biggest curiosity things that I research. I'm literally listening to an audiobook of the Bible right now. But my dad was like super obsessed with atheist stuff, and like so much so where he became like a board member of like a Freedom from Religion foundation, and like I went to a lot of atheist events and like church, like when, like not actually church, atheist church events, like Church of Satan events when I was a kid. And like, you know, I just grew up around like a lot of atheist people, which I feel like is pretty uncommon. I feel like most people who are atheists are like, or like, you know, not super religious, just like kind of exist in a bubble. I feel like unless you're gay, and you know, if you're like a straight atheist, I feel like you have to go and seek out community. But I feel like that's why they're so angsty. That's why the straight male atheists are so angsty, is because they're like, this is my one oppression, so they gotta maximize it. Where I feel like if you're a woman, or like specifically if you're a queer person, it might be slightly easier to find people like that. Maybe not if you're a woman, but definitely if you're queer. Because low-key, I think women tend to be more religious than men sometimes, low-key. At least all the women I know. Another piece to this puzzle is that as I've gotten older, I have gotten more introverted, and I have just needed more alone time. And, you know, while it is great to like constantly be around people, I think that when I am constantly around people, I struggle with my lack of an interiority, and like feeling like I have a thing to go back to where it's just me. Because I don't know, I get like kind of wigged out by like feeling like I'm being watched all the time. I've talked about like my struggle to be alone in the past, and like how I've really cultivated a life that I enjoy by myself, and like low-key I love being alone. And part of that is this rabbit hole thing, like, you know, like when you're with other people, it's hard to do research for things. It's hard to pursue things that other people find boring and only you find interesting, and like you don't have to feel judged by how much you like a thing, and you know, you don't have to feel this pressure to like some things to fit other people's expectations or to people please. Creating a space for yourself to just figure out who you are by yourself is really important, because at the end of the day, you are yourself, and constantly seeking attention in other people and seeking validation from other people gets really exhausting. And when I try to do that and I'm in this headspace, it does not feel very toxic, versus like I mean, it does feel very toxic, versus when I'm alone, it does not feel very toxic. It feels very peaceful and nice. Like, I think there's a reason that humans romanticize this kind of solitude life, even though it's definitely not healthy in big doses. Like, we romanticize Henry David Thoreau, who like lived in the cabin. We romanticize figures like Alex, I think his name was, from Call of the Wild or Into the Wild. I can't remember. I actually did not like that book, but I would be curious if I reread it now if I liked it. I think everyone just sort of struggles to a certain degree, and I think that anyone who doesn't spend good quality time alone is like doing a disservice to themselves low-key. Also, I just want to say, I feel like it's okay to want to do this to feel smart. I feel like you don't have to pursue this out of some like higher power of, you know, curiosity of the world. Like, it's okay to just want to research stuff to feel smart. You know, I think that a big part of enjoying research is getting over the hump of feeling stupid, like I do. And I have this big problem, and I've had this problem for a long time, where I feel this need to constantly downplay my intellect, even though I do think I'm a fairly smart and articulate person who has stuff to say. I mean, I'm doing it on the internet. I mean, what enough of a stamp of my own approval is that, I guess. I also kind of struggle to be vulnerable on the internet, because I just feel like this is me going back to my feminism ramblings, but I feel like women are just judged very harshly compared to like how men are constantly, and just women are always being canceled for one reason or another. And I don't know, it's just like being vulnerable on the internet, it's like, it's hard because it just feels like I'm cementing opinions that are temporary and subject to change, because I am young, and I feel like I will definitely change and revolve. And I have this like vision of me looking back at my old videos and being like, God, I was so cringe, and like, what was I thinking? But, you know, then I remember how I feel like when I read my old diaries, and I'm like much kinder to myself than I remember ever thinking I would be, and then, or expecting I would be. And it's really rewarding, because like I get a fair amount, or just more comments, honestly, than I would ever expect. Like, I expected to like but I've had like a fair amount of people reach out to me and tell me how much they love my videos and how much they watch them, and they look forward to the next one, even so, you know, they don't comment it, but they message me it directly, and I'm just like, wow, that's so crazy. Like, thank you so much. And, you know, it's just like, you know what, maybe this is not as cringe as I'm making it out to be, and even if it is cringe, like, who fucking cares? I'm so tired of feeling the need to police my own urges to be cringe. I feel like the titular thing that is low-key wrong with our society is cringe culture. Like, seems to be like one of the dominating forces of politics. ContraPoints has an amazing video about this. ContraPoints is my favorite YouTuber of all time. I love ContraPoints. I love every single one of her videos. I'm literally on her Patreon. That's how much I love her. She explains this concept very well, but it's like a very big part of our politics, especially how we think about like leftist politics. And I feel like, you know, it's a huge part of like how Donald Trump won the presidency, and like how women are treated, and just everything. It's just
And often this sort of fear of being cringe can prevent us from truly trying things and putting our all into things that sort of seem cringe or like out of the norm on the surface. And this is like the political social conditioning of society. And I'm not saying that like, I'm just saying that like they influence each other. Like, I'm not saying like you being judged by your friends is necessarily political, but I'm saying it can be. Like, you know, I think public shaming and cringe are very interlinked, and I think they're very interlinked in like group politics, and I think that blends into friend group politics. You know, I think there's a reason, like, politics at the end of the day are just people trying to navigate a society with each other, and that sort of stuff can be analyzed on like, you know, as much as in our reality TV show president ass clown sideshow as it can be in like Survivor or The Hunger Games. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's all a matter of perspective, and it all goes back to like these universal human tropes. Oh my god, I sound like a person who did too much shrooms, but you get what I'm saying. All of that is to say is that you should just follow the inner voice of cringe through to the light, and just embrace cringe, because on the other end of cringe is when you can truly let yourself be free to explore and open yourself up to the curiosity in the world that you wish to seek. Anyway, I'm gonna get wrapped up on this painting, and I just want to work on it a bit off camera. Sometimes it's best to paint off camera and take a break and come back to things, and I will wrap that up, show you how this painting turned out, and send you off with my final thoughts. And this is how she turned out. Isn't she pretty? I painted the sides with this like barbed wire thorn inspired pattern with like glitter on top, and I'm really happy with how that came out. I think it came out so cute, and I really just spent the last couple times like refining it and pumping up the glitter factor and the rainbow factor. And I was listening to Braiding Sweetgrass when I was reading this, so that was sort of like infusing this like magic about plants into my work, and I thought that was really fun. That book is beautiful. Like, I almost cried when I was reading it. Everyone go read that book right now. I'm making like a whole video about that book because I found it so interesting. But anyway,
let me know what you think in the comments below. Let me know if you have any curiosity rabbit holes that you've been falling down recently. Let me know what weird Wikipedia pages you like to troll at 3 a.m. and take your notes on. And how many journals do you have sitting on your shelf unused for years that are begging you to crack them open? Let me know. Thank you so much for watching. Like and subscribe. Bye.